Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, sensitive U.S. military information allegedly sold to China for $40,000. A U.S. Army intelligence analyst pleading guilty to related charges. Morgan Stanley removes 60 more Chinese stocks from its lucrative indexes. It's a big financial blow for the companies and a sign all is not well with China's economy. The U.S. and South Korea holding their largest ever live fire drills near the country's northern border. North Korea pushes back. And uproar over an electric Mercedes-Benz car that burst into flames in South Korea, with concerns getting raised both about fire safety and a Chinese battery maker. A U.S. Army intelligence analyst pleaded guilty Tuesday to selling military information to China. That's according to the Justice Department. The analyst is Sergeant Corbin Schultz, a 24-year-old with top clearance in the military. The indictment said he allegedly gave a Hong Kong resident some military documents. That includes information about U.S. weapon systems, such as rockets and hypersonic equipment, documents about Chinese military tactics and its rocket force, and the lessons the U.S. has learned from Russia's war on Ukraine. Information that could be useful if Washington were to defend Taiwan from a Chinese invasion. The Hong Kong resident is suspected of being associated with the Chinese Communist Party. Schultz allegedly received over $40,000 for giving out that information. His sentencing is scheduled for January next year. He could face up to 65 years in prison. A U.S. official said the case serves as a warning that if any U.S. Army members, past or present, get approached for classified information, they should report it to appropriate authorities within 24 hours or be held fully accountable for their inaction. An FBI official said China has been aggressively targeting U.S. military personnel. A former U.S. Marine pilot called Daniel Dugan is facing allegations that he trained Chinese military pilots. He was arrested in Australia and is said to be extradited back to the U.S. Beijing has also been recruiting pilots from NATO, the world's most powerful military alliance. Targets include current and former members, from pilots to maintainers and other technical experts. Experts say Beijing's goal is to use the knowledge gained to develop Chinese military capabilities. The House is set to vote on a range of bills related to China. To explore Washington's latest approach toward the Chinese regime, we spoke with Stephen Yates, former White House Deputy National Security Advisor and chair of the China Policy Initiative at America First Policy Institute. Steve Yates, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, China Week is coming up, or when the House is set to vote on several China-related measures next month. Now, what's your feel for what bills could be voted on?
Well, there's a whole bunch of accumulated miscellaneous items that have been introduced and sort of went the way of most legislation, which is to get introduced, go into committee, maybe get a hearing, have some consideration, but then otherwise kind of lay in wait for another Congress. And so this is kind of last shot. There's a lot of things that were related to what the Select Committee on Strategic Competition with the Chinese Communist Party had put forward out of the committees of jurisdiction. But in some ways, it's a bit of a kitchen sink. There have been efforts to try to organize these by theme. My preferred theme would be to roll them together into kind of a China Reciprocity Trade Act. But that would drop some of the other topics. But really, you have something in almost every element of government that is available if they want to put it forward to vote on.
On that note, House Speaker Mike Johnson is saying that these bills would be individually introduced and voted on rather than as a larger bundle. He's saying that's in hopes there will be more bipartisan consensus. He's also saying the goal here is to, quote, empower the next administration to hit our enemies' economies on day one. Now, how successful do you see that strategy being?
Well, in the House of Representatives, I think there's fairly good chance that everything that is related to the strategic economic relationship probably will have a good chance of passage with bipartisan support. That is the largest, most detailed report that came out of the Select Committee. It's where senior members on both parties have been vocal about pushing for things. Where bipartisanship has fallen apart more has been things related to the border, sometimes even on fentanyl, some things having to do with high tech. Those are areas where things got a little bit sketchier, including even on domestic things having to do with influence operations, fake police stations. That got conflated with ethnic profiling in some of the congressional deliberations. So those are the areas where bipartisanship gets weaker for reasons that escape me, but I'm a partisan.
Steve Yates, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
China's economic challenges persist as Morgan Stanley Capital International dropped 60 Chinese stocks from its indexes. This marks another step in a long trend.
More bad news for China's economy. Morgan Stanley Capital International, or MSCI, has dropped 60 China stocks from its indexes. Trillions of dollars in managed assets use MSCI as a benchmark.
People are going to take money out of China because they want to mimic the index. Now look at the economy. It is clearly stumbling.
China expert Gordon Chang says this is part of a larger trend.
MSCI dropped 56 Chinese stocks in May and 66 in February. So it's clear where this is all going. And it's a real indication of the problems inside China.
Chang says Communist Party policies are isolating China from the rest of the world. And this is making Chinese stocks less attractive.
If you look at the MSCI China index over the last year, it's essentially had no growth. And that's not good as an investor.
Economist Riley Walters says there are still many Chinese companies in MSCI's indexes, but he suspects more may be dropped in the future.
Foreign direct investment pulling out at historic levels. We're seeing no demand. We're seeing manufacturing employment decrease. They're in a downward cycle right now. And, people, they have different terms for it. Doom cycle might be one of them.
Walter says China's economy will have to crawl up a high hill to regain the confidence of international investors.
Lawmakers and rights groups are demanding that the CCP release a human rights lawyer not seen in 7 years. Gao Zhishen went missing from his home in China's Shanxi region in 2017. He had already been imprisoned, but under house arrest and tortured by Chinese authorities at that time. Gao provided legal aid to people targeted by the Chinese regime for their spiritual and religious beliefs. The U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China put out a statement on X. It marked the 7th anniversary of his disappearance and demanded his immediate and unconditional release. A commissioner from the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom also called for Gao's freedom. She said he courageously defended rights of religious minorities like House Christians and Falun Gong practitioners in China. Another rights commissioner urged the government to impose sanctions on Chinese regime officials responsible for persecuting human rights lawyers. Nearly 100 rights activists, including Gao's wife, called for his release in front of the Chinese consulate in San Francisco this week. The U.S. military is conducting live-fire drills in South Korea Wednesday to test their readiness on the Korean peninsula. The drills were conducted by the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team and the 1st Armored Division. They took place less than 20 miles from the heavily fortified border with North Korea. The temporary deployment comes in addition to the 28,000 American troops stationed in South Korea. South Korea and the U.S. are set to conduct their annual summertime military drills next week. The aim is to ramp up the ability to counter North Korean weapons, including missiles, GPS jammers, and cyber attacks. South Korean and American forces will also conduct concurrent field maneuvers and live fire drills. Now turning to an update on a major fire in South Korea. About 140 Mercedes-Benz electric vehicles burst into flames earlier this month. Mercedes supplier in South Korea disclosed on Tuesday that that car exploded and caused the fire had a car battery made in China.
The local fire department said that the surveillance video suggests this fire shows all the signs of being caused by a battery. Mercedes Korea disclosed on Tuesday that the battery was made by a Chinese manufacturer, Farasis Energy. Experts say battery fires are more difficult to extinguish due to a chain reaction within the battery cells, also known as the thermal runaway effect. Now, the fire is causing nationwide panic about electric cars in South Korea, with citizens calling for transparency on battery supply chains.
Rare earth minerals are essential to modern life. They're used to make smartphones, televisions, cars, and even military equipment. But a report warns China's near total control over the world's rare earth minerals leaves the West in a compromising position. And it calls for the Five Eyes Alliance to make moves to reduce their dependence on China. Here's NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson with more.
Western nations face a potentially major national security risk. China controls some 60% of the world's rare earth minerals and processes around 90% of them, a near complete monopoly. Helena Ivanov, Associate Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, said this leaves the West extremely exposed to China.
For the United States, this is particularly problematic because not long ago, the United States was one of the leading countries when it comes to exporting rare earth minerals. But then in the subsequent years, America basically increased step by step its reliance on China, and nowadays imports as much as 80% of rare earth minerals from China.
Rare earth elements are a set of 17 metallic elements essential for many technology applications, from mobile phones, magnets and MRI machines to cars and military equipment like fighter jets. Ivanov's recent report, Decreasing Rare Earths Dependency, warns that in the event of a confrontation with the US, China could block supplies and deplete the US's stock of essential defense minerals in less than 90 days. That could leave defense systems compromised. The good news for the US, Ivanov says, is that recent administrations have taken steps in the right direction.
Both under Trump administration as well as Biden's administrations, steps have been taken to ramp up domestic production in the attempt, of course, to reduce this dependence on China.
She said this cannot be done overnight and expects it could take at least 10 years' time, but it's important to start doing it now. Her report recommends the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, made up of the United States and 4 allies, to ramp up domestic production by operating old rare earth mineral mines more effectively, as well as opening new mines. She also recommends expanding their alliance to include trade of minerals between themselves, and looking beyond the alliance for other friendly countries to trade with, such as Sweden.
And finally, seek alternatives to rare earth minerals themselves. Tesla has committed to creating the latest generation of EV batteries without rare earths at all, so invest in that kind of research. But also, additionally, you could invest in e-waste recycling, which, according to some estimates, could potentially satisfy as much as a quarter of our demand for rare earth minerals.
Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Turning our attention now to Northern Europe, Estonia is questioning China's claims about a shipwreck in the Baltic Sea. The incident dates back to last October, where a Chinese-owned container vessel damaged a major gas pipeline connecting Estonia to Finland. Beijing admitted to the incident on Monday, saying it was the result of a strong storm. But Estonia's defense minister found that hard to believe. He questioned why the ship's captain didn't notice its anchor had been dragging along the seabed. A $38 million repair on the pipeline wrapped up this April. The defense minister said he doesn't expect China to cover the cost. Both Estonia and Finland are investigating the incident. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A private security guard forcing a food delivery rider to kneel, spiraling into a full-blown protest in China. Hundreds of delivery workers rallying in support. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida says he won't run for re-election. Kishida's tenure was marked by rising aggression from China. What's next for Japan? And a Chinese rocket stage exploded in space, scattering into over 700 pieces of debris into orbit. Analysts warn that 1,000 satellites in Earth orbit could now be at collision risk. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.